hope you guys had a great Christmas and a great Christmas day. Christmas Day for me ended with a little bit of fanfare. I'd had some problems on Christmas Eve, but then Christmas Day, by and large, I felt just kind of tired and worn out. That night, though, after my family had gone back to Charlotte, I started feeling kind of crummy and started running a fever. And by about 9:30, Caroline said, "Let's go ahead and go to bed." And I remember thinking, that's going to be a bad idea for me to actually get up and move. But I did, and this stomach bug that's going around decided to bring me my final Christmas present. And so that was on Christmas night. The next morning I woke up and the fever was gone. My stomach had calmed down. I didn't feel great, but I felt a lot better. And so I got up, got dressed, and I came to the church. And by about mid-morning, Caroline had called me and she said, "Would you be interested in meeting me and the kids at McDonald's up at Bridford and Wendover for lunch?" I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And at this point I'm thinking, and I hope we eat early because I'm hungry. I had essentially not had supper the night before. I had eaten nothing for breakfast. And so it's been lunch, about 24 hours since I've eaten anything. I'm really hungry. So I meet them at McDonald's and I place my order, and I got the chicken McNugget combo. I know some of you hate McDonald's chicken nuggets because you're aware, like I am, that they're made essentially of chicken feathers and beaks, right? I know that, but for some reason, I think that they're good, especially with McDonald's sweet and sour sauce. I like them. So I ordered the chicken nugget combo. The kids get Happy Meals. 3 of them have cheeseburger Happy Meals. Andrew has a chicken nugget combo. So we're looking for a table that'll hold our gang of 6, and we find one in the play area of that McDonald's. And so we sit down, and we begin to have lunch. All is going well. Andrew is beside me, and he is eating his chicken nuggets, and somehow he moves the wrong way, and he topples his container of nuggets. He's already eaten 1.5, and the others fall to the floor. So now there's 2. Fully half of his chicken nuggets are now on the floor. And so Andrew makes this face, and he's like, "My nuggets have fallen on the floor." And I said, "Pick them up. They're okay." And so whining about that. Anyway, so I said, "Yeah, pick them up. They're okay." And Andrew looks at me like, "What, are you crazy? They're on the floor." At this point, Caroline has come over. She's picking them up, and she hears me explain to Andrew that just kind of dust them off. They'll be fine. And she said, "They were on the floor." I said, "Yeah, they were on the floor. Just put some sweet and sour sauce on them. They'll be fine." And so she says, "Well, then you eat them." I said, "Fine." And so I took 2 of my nuggets, gave them to Andrew, and I took his 2 nuggets. I dipped them in sweet and sour sauce, and they were, wonderful. And the only problem, though, is that Caroline is looking at me with absolute palpable disgust. I mean, it's as though I have pinched the head off of a baby or something. And she's looking at me like, and she said, I can't believe that you were eating chicken nuggets off the floor of a McDonald's in the play area, no less. I said, "It's not like I found them in the bathroom or something." I said, "They mopped the floor out here. They weren't walked on or anything. They were on there. I just kind of dusted them off. They were fine." Now, from Caroline's perspective, though, these nuggets, they were a lost cause. There was no dusting them off. What we needed were new nuggets. I thought it was fine to have the old ones. Last week, we began a series of messages that I've entitled, "When the Fizz is Gone." And what we've been talking about is how, especially if you've known the Lord for any length of time, very easily it can happen where the enthusiasm, the passion, the zeal, the vibrancy and the vitality and the closeness with God, it just kind of fades and subsides to the point where things feel very stale, very flat, very much lifeless. There's no vitality, kind of like a flat Coke. The fizz is gone. And if you're honest, you may say, "Well, Michael, that's kind of how I feel about my relationship with the Lord right now. It's not that I don't love God and God doesn't love me, but my relationship with Him, it feels very stale, very lifeless, very flat." And upon thinking that, you also follow that with a thought, I wish that it were not that way. I wish that things were different. In fact, this is the first Sunday in a new year. I want things to be different. I'm going to make things different. I want to see if I can get this thing fixed and get the fizz back into my walk with God. What I would say to you is this: what you need are not some dusted off nuggets. You need some new ones. You don't need some dusted off nuggets. What you need are some new ones. What you need is not a revamped, dusted off, fixed up, spruced up walk with God. What I'm suggesting is that you need a new one. Now that being said, our inclination, our temptation though, is to try to fix up, to spruce up, to revamp, revitalize, refresh, dust off this old walk. The question though is why? Why is it that we're just, instead of seeking to gain a new, fresh walk with God, we want to dust off the old one? Because of two simple yet important and altogether faulty notions that Jesus identifies in Luke chapter 5. If you would look with me in your Bibles there this morning, Luke chapter 5, beginning with verse 36. Luke chapter 5, beginning with verse 36. My guess is now no one wants to come, Caroline, to eat at our house. It's clean. It'll be okay. Luke 5, verse 36, Jesus, we're told, spoke a parable to them and said, "No one puts a piece from a new garment on an old one. Otherwise, the new one makes a tear, and also the piece that was taken out of the new does not match the old. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, or else the new wine will burst the wineskins and be spilled, and the wineskins will be ruined. New wine must be put into new wineskins, and both are preserved. No one having drunk old wine immediately desires new, for he says the old is better." Jesus, in these few verses, as he's speaking in parable, is effectively answering for us the question of concern, which is this: why exactly is it when we recognize our walk with God is stale, lifeless, and flat, why do we try to fix that up instead of getting a new one? Well, because of two mentalities that he describes here. And the first is this: the mentality that says, I think I can just fix it. I think I can just fix it. Now, what Jesus says here doesn't occur in a vacuum. It happens with some context. At this point, we're early on in Jesus' public ministry. And among the first things that he has done at this point is to call his disciples. And so he has called them. And as he is beginning to teach and to interact with people, folks are starting to pay attention. In particular, the religious leadership and the Pharisees especially. They are taking note of and beginning already to get very skeptical and looking at Jesus with a lot of ire and contempt. And among the reasons that they do so is primarily Jesus is doing things differently than they think it should be done, or furthermore, beyond how it's always been done. They notice, among other things, and already in Luke's gospel, Jesus is being criticized by the Pharisees because he eats and shares meals with tax collectors and sinners. Now, from the mind of the Pharisee, these are people to be shunned. These are outcasts that we ought to have nothing to do with. But Jesus is going to their home and he's sharing a meal with them. That doesn't make any sense. Furthermore, in the verses just prior to this passage, they note and come to Jesus with an observation. They say to him, Jesus, we watched John the Baptist and his disciples, and we notice about them a couple of things. First of all, we notice that they regularly fast and they're regularly praying, which is to say they publicly pray. We notice your disciples, you don't do that. And the contempt, the scorn that's behind those words is almost palpable. In verse 34, Jesus responds to them directly, but then he seeks to further flesh out truth to them through the use of some parables, a couple of illustrations. And he starts with one in verse 36, and he says, "No one puts a piece from a new garment on an old one, otherwise the new makes a tear, and also the piece that was taken out of the new does not match the old." So let's see if we can get the mental picture here. Suppose you're living back in the first century, and if you're living in the first century, you don't have a whole lot of clothes to begin with. I mean, a limited number of garments. There's not washing machines and dryers, and furthermore, fabric and making these things. This is all expensive. You would have had a very limited number of garments, very few robes. And let's suppose that your absolute favorite robe you've had for some time. It was given to you as a gift, and you love it. You have been wearing it for years, and it's so comfortable, it's so broken in, it makes you look taller, it makes you look skinnier. This is your favorite robe. But accidentally one day you're going through the kitchen and it snags on the corner of the table, and you look down, oh man, I've got a tear in my robe. And the first thought is, well, it's old, I ought to toss this thing. It's torn now. But then you think, you know what, I hate to do that. That is, after all, my favorite robe. And so you have an idea. You know, I got this new robe for Christmas. What I'll do, there's a little bit of excess fabric in that. I'm going to take out some of that fabric and I'll make a patch. And then I'll sew that onto my old robe and then it'll be fixed. Now, Jesus says that you're not going to do this because there's going to be two problems. The first is fairly simple and very obvious, which is that they're not going to match. Even if both of the robes are brown, the old one has been washed repeatedly. And in time, the dye has faded, the fabric is faded. It looks more washed out. It looks more white than this new, more vibrant shade of brown. And if you put that new fabric patch on the old garment, it's going to be blatantly obvious it's a patch. But then there's another problem that Jesus describes that is greater. Now keep in mind, at this point in history, there's no such thing as any man-made fabrics. And so all these were going to be very natural fabrics. There was no such thing as polyester, to be sure. Nothing such as pre-shrunk cotton. And so if you've got a cotton robe, and you take that brand new piece of cotton fabric and sew it onto the old robe, well, what's going to happen the first time that it gets washed? What's going to happen the first time that patch gets wet? Well, it's going to begin, as it dries, to shrink. And as it shrinks, it's going to take the tear that it's seeking to cover, and it's going to make it even larger. Accordingly, Jesus says in verse 36, no one does this. No one does this. Well, spiritually speaking, people try to do something like that all of the time. They come to a point where, like I mentioned earlier, where spiritually they realize, my walk with God really just kind of stinks. There really is no life. There's no vitality. Things feel very stale. They feel very flat. Where once there was deep commitment and steadfast service, that's been replaced with apathy and the mentality that says, let somebody else do it. Where once there was enthusiasm and growing closer and this passion to know more about God and spend time talking to Him and hearing from Him and reading about what He said, well, that's been replaced with this thought. I wonder what's on TV tonight. Where once there was this mentality that recognized I am a work in progress and the end goal is for me to become increasingly like Jesus, that mentality has been replaced with this. I'm just kind of okay with how things are. And when that happens and you get to that state, God, through the power of His Spirit, is over time going to help you realize that. He's going to convict you of that. And finally, you come and you look at the days gone by, and you look at the past and the zeal and the passion and the enthusiasm of the past, and that becomes a burden that you then want to pursue. I want to recapture the glory. I want to recapture the enthusiasm and the passion of days gone by. And once that becomes the burden and once that becomes the goal, you recognize and you say, you know what, my spiritual life stinks. I've got to do something, and here it comes. I think I can just fix it. I think I can just fix it. So to fix it, I've got to be doing something. And then you set out to do more. What needs to be done, then I need to go down to the church and talk to them and find out what needs exist and then commit myself to meeting those needs. I need to read more, pray more, attend more, give more, serve more, talk more, do everything more. And as we begin to do more, what we are in effect doing is seeking to bring change from the outside in, like putting on a patch. Been there before? Odds are, if you have been in a relationship with God for any measured period of time, that has happened. You told yourself, I can just fix it. And for a while, it looked like you were experiencing some success. Things start seeming to go up for a while. And then with the passage of time, maybe weeks, perhaps a few months, it starts ebbing back down. And you get back to where you were, if not, in fact, even worse. Stale, flat, dead. It worked for a while, but you slid back into that slump, and maybe you're still sitting there today. About 8 or 9 months ago, it was, like a Tuesday afternoon. I had left the church that day, and I pulled out onto Hilltop Road, and as soon as I turned onto Hilltop, I can tell something is not right. My car's making a strange sound. It's not handling right, and so I take the first street on the right, and I get out and I look, and my back right tire is just flat as a flitter. And long story short, I get the spare on it. I take it down to Merchant's Tire where I'd purchased those tires. I had the road hazard warranty on it. They discovered there was a screw or a nail or something in it, and they're going to repair it. And how they repair it is to take the tire off the wheel. They put a plug from the inside out, and then they patch that from the inside and seal it from the inside out. And so I'm sitting in the waiting room. Some time passes. They tell me it's fixed. And so finally I get to head home. And I feel relieved, that that's been taken care of. So I get up the next morning and I walk out into the driveway to get in the car to head to the church. And the first thing I notice, because I can see that passenger side of the car, the tire's flat again. Well, that stinks. So long story short, I put the spare on it. I get back to the tire place, explain to them what happened, and they said, the angle that nail or that screw went in made it kind of tough. Those plugs are designed, they've got a little bit of leeway, but the angle is a little tough. We'll fix it. We'll get you straight. And so they fixed it. They repaired it again. And so I come to the church, spend all day at the church. I come back out to my car in the afternoon. It still looks fine. I head home, and I stay at home that night. All is well. The next morning, I get up to head to the car to come to church, and again, this tire is flat. 3 days in a row now, I've got a flat tire, and I head back to the tire place, and they said this to me. That plug, again, it's got a little bit of wiggle room, but the angle is such that we just can't repair this. What you need is a new one. We can't patch this. What you need is a new one. Understand me in this. Not everything can be fixed. A patch is not the solution to every problem. Sometimes things need to be replaced. If you're here today and you would say, Michael, spiritually for me the fizz is gone, I want you to forego the idea of fixing it. Don't tell yourself, I can just fix this. Understand what you need is not repair. What you need is replacement. Well, how do you get a new one? How do you get a fresh one? I promise, if you'll stick with me, I'll answer that question. But again, we start with this mentality. There's lack of life and vitality in my walk with Lord. Things are flat. The fizz is gone. And so we tell ourselves, I can fix this. That's faulty notion number one. The second faulty notion that Jesus identifies is this. I think I can still use that. I think I can still use that. So in verse 36, he's used the parable describing patching fabric. Now he changes metaphors in verse 37. He says, no one puts new wine into old wineskins, or else the new wineskin bursts the wineskins, blah, 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 blah. All right, so we're talking about wine and wineskins. For what Jesus is saying here to make sense to us, we need to think about what's going on in the first century. They don't have Rubbermaid. They don't have Tupperware. They don't have empty Coke or Pepsi bottles that they can use to contain liquids or fluids, especially those for drinking or personally consuming. So if you need a bottle, you've got to make a bottle. And so how the bottle, in this case the wine bottle would be made, is to take the particular animal of choice, and its head and legs would be removed, the hide of this animal would be removed and cleaned, and they would take special attention to tan this in such a way that there wouldn't be foul or disagreeable flavors that would affect whatever it is that you're going to put inside. And so once the hide has been prepared properly, then it would be sewn up, and there would be left an opening at the top that you would put a cork or some type of stopper in the top. Now at that point, then this becomes a bottle, and it's first side out. It's even got like a koozie on it, and so it's wonderful. And so that's what they were going to do to carry liquids, to carry drinks in the first century. It's what they would use to contain wine. But Jesus says no one is going to put new wine into an old wineskin. And the reason for that was simple. You put new wine into this old wineskin, what happens with the passage of time to these skins? Well, they get increasingly rigid. They lose their pliable nature. They get firm, and they lose the ability to expand and contract. And if you put new wine into this old bottle, what's going to happen is that those fermentation processes are still going to be continuing. And there's going to be the buildup of gas. And with that bottle being capped, it's going to eventually burst the seams of the wineskin, and both the wineskin and the new wine is going to be lost. So Jesus, appealing to that, says, you're not going to do that. But think with me as hypothetically a first century listener to Jesus would have. You understood the temptation because it's a pain to make a new wineskin. You got to go kill something, clean something, tan something, sew something. All this work that you've got to do to just fix one bottle. And so you tell yourself, new wine should go into new wineskins, but this one I haven't had that long, this old one. It's been really good. I really like this one. It's really comfortable. It's just the right size. It's so much trouble to make a new one. I think I can just use that. And so you take the new wine, you put it into the old wineskin, and what Jesus says comes to fruition. Those fermentating gases begin to build up, and they are expanding to the point where this old bottle cannot expand anymore. It's not pliable like a new one, and the seams burst. The bottle is wasted. The wine is lost. At this point, you're in a fix. At this point, things kind of stink. After all, your robe is now ripped because of a crummy patch. Now your bottle's broken and you smell like booze. Well, things stink. And this happened because you told yourself, I think I can fix it. And furthermore, I think I can still use that. Well, spiritually speaking, what am I talking about? Well, people regularly can look at their walk with God and recognize, hey, the fizz is gone. Things are flat and dull and lifeless. The vitality is gone. The fizz is gone. It's just seemingly dead. And they tell themselves, what I need is a fresh experience. And I need a new encounter with God. I need to go to a revival service somewhere. I need to go to a conference somewhere. I need to go to some type of seminar that's going to really impact me. I need this new experience with God. And perhaps I can get it through one of those services. Maybe I can go to the Christian bookstore and find a new Bible study book that's going to bring it about. Maybe there's some concert that I can go to. There's something I've got to do, and if I get this new experience, this fresh encounter, well, that's going to fix everything. Well, when you take new experiences that you put into an old you where nothing else changes, there's never going to be any success. We've got an upstairs to our house there's a bedroom and a full bath up there, and the kids go up there and play sometime, but it's not regularly used space for us. And it essentially functions as great guest room and guest bathroom. And my sister came last weekend and spent a couple of days with us. And last Sunday morning, she called me upstairs and she said, I want you to see something. She takes me into the bathroom and she shows me the commode. And I don't know if you've paid attention to how commodes work very much, but I will now enlighten you. Step one. No, anyway. You've got the base of the commode, the bowl. In the back, you've got a tank, and that tank is attached to the base with two bolts that have little rubber bushings around them. And around one of those bolts, there's a drip of water coming down. Not a lot, but a little bit. And so I thought to myself, well, those gaskets in time can just get to the point they need to be replaced. This afternoon, I'll go to Home Depot, get some new bolts that have the new washers on it. I'll fix that, no problem. And so sure enough, that's what I was going to do. And I came to church last week, and after we'd had lunch, I go upstairs, I get the water turned off to the commode. At the wall, I drain the tank, and I examine everything first. And I can see that the guts, the mechanism of the commode and the tank, that all seems to be fine. There is a supply line. It's a pipe that carries the water from the wall up to the tank. Now, it's not a flexible hose or anything. It's a fixed pipe that's been bent. Looks like by a plumber. That seems to be fine. The only problem, as I see it, are these bolts. If I just go get new bolts and replace those, it's going to be fine. I go to Home Depot, I get those, I come back, I put those in, I get them as tight as I should, or so I think, and I tell myself the problem's fixed. I turn the water back on, the tank fills up. Great. I'm starting to put my tools away, and I look over, drip, drip, drip. Well, I must not have gotten them tight enough. And so I turned the water back off. I drained the tank back out. And so then I get my screwdriver in there, and I tighten this to the point where if I tighten it anymore, I feel like I'm probably going to be cracking this porcelain. So I've got it as tight as I can possibly make it. And so I tell myself, now the problem is fixed. I turn the water back on. The tank fills back up. I'm relieved. Drip, drip, drip. At this point, I'm flummoxed. I can't figure this out. So I turn the water back off, I drain it back out, I take the bolts off, and now the only thing that is attaching this tank to anything, the only thing that's holding it all in place is that one metal pipe that comes from the wall, the one that seemingly a plumber put in when that was installed. And I'm looking, and all of a sudden I discovered the problem. And the problem was really not with the bolts. The problem was with the supply line. When it was bent, it looked like or seemed that it was bent appropriately, but it was left a little too high, and so the tank was not seated on there flat. It was kind of cockeyed on there. As a result, the bolts couldn't properly tighten down, and there wasn't a proper seal. I've replaced that line, and the problem's fixed. I say all that to say this. My problem was not with the bolts I was seeking to replace. My problem was with the pipe that I was holding on to. My problem was not with what I was seeking to replace. My problem was with the pipe that I was holding on to. When you discover that your spiritual life is flatlined and your walk with God has lost its fizz, you will generally not find success. Generally not find any lasting success whatsoever when you decide, I'm going to fix this, and try to get a new encounter when nothing else about you changes. A new experience in the old you is destined for failure. So that leads us to this place. If what I need is a new, fresh walk, how do I get that? And maybe you're thinking, Michael, you've painted the picture, you've diagnosed the problem. What's the solution? What's the cure? Well, as we finish today, I want to give you just in plain, simple, brass tacks application form a few steps to take. Step number one is this. Stop what you're doing. Just stop. Take a break from everything for a little bit. Don't think about what obligations, in particular, what church obligations that may be looming or responsibilities that you have. Just stop and you get away from any and everything else for a little bit so that it's just you and the God who made you. Step one, just stop. Step number two, recognize the present condition. Recognize the present condition. As you stopped everything else and you shut out all the other voices that might be a distraction, it's just you and God, and you're talking to God. Ask Him to do something. Say, Lord, will you help me to see me in my walk with you for what it is? Furthermore, will you help me to see what it could be? Give me a glimpse of what it should or ought to be. After all, solutions will never come until problems are actually realized. Recognize the present condition. Step number three is this: forego personal improvement. Forego personal improvement. Decide and tell yourself that the maker of the mess, that's me, that's you, that the maker of the mess cannot and will not be the fixer of the mess. If things are going to change, it's not going to occur because you get a patch out and bring change from the inside out. God and God alone has to do something, and He can and will do something, but it's going to be from the inside out. You've got to forego your own attempts at personal improvement. Step number four is this: ask God for what you come to discover you need. Ask God for what you come to discover you need. As you're having this time alone with God, you've gotten away from any and everything else. God is showing you how things are. He's giving you a glimpse of what could and should be. You have foregone this notion, I can fix this, and you're saying, God, I'm in your hands. And as God begins to speak to you, you're going to come to recognize there is something in particular that you're going to need from God. Do you remember the conversation that David had with the Lord when he got to his own point of reaching rock bottom? He did not call out to the Lord and say, God, will you fix me? Will you repair me? Will you mend me? He said very simply this and asked God, will you create in me a clean heart and renew a right or steadfast spirit within me? David came to recognize his need that God alone could meet. And he says, God, will you do that? Step number 5, ask God what needs to go. Ask God what needs to go. Jesus in this passage explains the futility of putting new wine into old wineskins. And there may absolutely, and I am confident in each of our lives, there are things and aspects of our lives that just simply need to go. It may be in how you're using your time at work, at church, at home. It may be in how you're using money. It may be in the relationships that you have, whether it's a friend that you have or a boyfriend or a girlfriend. But God will show you what needs to change. It may be an attitude. It may be an expectation. It may be a sense of entitlement. But if you're having this open, honest conversation with God, He's going to show you what exactly needs to go, what junk needs to head to the dump. Because God understands, and He wants you to understand this. You put a fresh experience into an old you where nothing else changes, well, there's going to be no success. This new wine is going to burst the old wineskin. The final step is this. Ask God for the next step. Ask God for the next step. If you want a fresh and meaningful and new walk with God, you will only experience that and you will only maintain that so long as you're walking close with Him. And you will never walk and remain close with Him and to Him so long as you are charting the course. So what you have to do, very simply, is this. Say, okay, God, you have me now where I believe that you want me. I want to be and I want to remain this close with you. And for that to happen, I can't walk away. And I can't chart the course. So will you show me the next step that you want me to take? Show me the direction that you're going and tell yourself, wherever He leads, I'm going to go. Listen, if you're serious about this, genuinely desiring to have a walk with God that matters, having a walk with God that's consequential, having a walk with God that's filled with vitality and life and passion and enthusiasm, the good news is you can have it, but it will never come so long as you look at yourself and say, I can fix that and I can still use that. If you want a fresh walk, what I'm saying to you is that you need a new one. What I'm saying collectively is that our temptation is to try and spruce up stale, flat, and dead Christian walks. Let me ask you this. When crackers go stale, what do you do with them? You toss them. When a Coke goes flat, what do? You throw it away. When something dies, what do? You bury it. Today, I'd have you consider doing the same thing with your present walk with God. And instead of trying to refresh, how about deciding, I want a new one? I want a new one. It's the first Sunday in 2014. You've perhaps been thinking about resolutions and clean slates and fresh starts. The good news is God is offering to you the ability to get that with Him. And if you feel like that logo is the picture of you, the fizz is gone, everything is flat, it doesn't have to stay that way. But it's ultimately going to be up to you if something changes. I want you to bow your heads with me.